morning, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Trevor with Trevor Shepard Severe Weather, and today we're going to bring you episode 2 of our Severe Weather podcast. Today we're going to be having a kind of an after-action review of our latest storm chase. This is very early in the season, so buckle up and here we go. All right, so we're here with the driver Ben again, and let's discuss our last storm chase here. What we've learned, some lessons, what we saw, what we could have done better, what we did good. Plus, too, we've actually got video now that we can show what we were actually doing. And this, I believe, what road was this? Was this I-44? I think we were going down.
Hey, Trevor. Yeah, so we're heading just south I-44 here towards Goodman on March 17th. This is approximately 3 o'clock roughly, so, we're cruising down there onto our first cell that popped off, and you can see, you can't really see it yet, but you can kind of make out the storm motion start 12 o'clock.
Yeah, this may be difficult to see like on a phone or something. You can actually see the very well-defined wall cloud. This ended up becoming a tornado. Literally parallel with the road, right down the middle of the road, you can see a very pronounced lowering from the clouds there. You got beautiful structure here as well. You can see the tail cloud from the supercell. There, if you were to zoom in, if you're able to see what we were seeing, you could actually see the tornado currently. We're pretty far from it at this point. We're probably about 10 to 15 miles from it, but you could still very clearly see the tornado. But just to kind of preface this too, this was a very active weather event. This is when, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, all those places were getting hit very hard, very strong tornadoes. And in southwest Missouri, luckily, hindsight, nobody got hurt. There was some damage. There was at least one confirmed EF1 tornado. The National Weather Service confirmed that as 85 yards wide, up to potentially 25-mile track, which is what I would consider a long track tornado.
Yeah, absolutely, Trevor. This system was fairly long-lived. Unfortunately, we were on the wrong side of the system at this time, and we always do our research and try to predict best we can with models prior, but sometimes you just kind of get caught in a bad spot.
Well, I think too, because again, with storm chasing, there's a lot of guessing involved, I would say, educated guesses, and
split-second
really
decisions.
Concerned with a different storm that was actually in a different state at the time when this one began to really become more robust and strengthened. So we had to actually change current positions, and obviously that's kind of hard to do whenever road systems aren't that great. I mean, we've got I-44, which is amazing for getting east to west, but when you have to head south, then that's when you need to start taking back roads. You need to start planning different routes, and at this point GPS isn't exactly cooperative with you. We're trying to find roads that we're seeing on Google Maps, for example, that we don't see in real life. So it can be
difficult.
It can be hard. And this is where we're from too, so you can imagine when you've got storm chasers from out of state or out of town in an area, this is also why it can be so dangerous.
Especially around here compared to Oklahoma,
yeah,
Kansas.
As you'll see in this, I mean, this is why storm chasers call this area the jungle, because there are trees and hills everywhere, and sometimes you can't see the tornado until it's either too late or too much. Now, this is the first time we stopped off. Unfortunately, the GoPro was obviously facing forward in the vehicle. At this point, we are doing our jobs as spotters. We're simply just hanging out, making sure that there's no active tornado on the ground.
Yeah, we have pretty good eyes on the wall cloud to our left at this point.
Yeah,
we reposition here
I think when we upload this, I'll throw up a picture of what we were seeing while this was going on here. But this was that moment as we're sitting there, we really got to debate, because these storms aren't stopping. They're moving forward. And you've always got to be 3 steps ahead of the storm, basically. And that can be difficult if you can't tell exactly where the storm's going, because if you recall from our last podcast, we talked about like storm weather radar. There's a 6-minute window where nothing can be seen as that radar band, rotates. And as we're in the middle of that 6 minutes, all we can rely on is our eyeballs. And
visual visual line of sight,
and
these systems.
And we're just far enough from the storm. It's really hard to see any sort of motion. So it's hard to make a call when a storm can move from, north to south, east to west, in 6 minutes. It could be 6 miles away. And at that point, we couldn't catch up to it.
It's too far gone, and we can't, call in and say, hey, we see something. I mean, we got to put ourselves in the best position to visually see something to give people the best chance of knowing it's coming their way, extending the tornado warning brackets and things of that nature.
Yep. And something too, and kind of leaping ahead here, the hypervigilance we had during this entire involvement, we were out for probably almost 8 hours, and we were exhausted by the end of
we
this.
were pretty tired.
I mean, it was...
We drove home and didn't say a single word to each other. We're just zoned out.
I mean, it was... We had one gear, and that gear was go. And the entire time, because really when you're out here doing this, I mean, I don't want to make this sound dramatic or anything, but really our lives are in our hands at this moment. And small mistakes could lead to you killing yourself.
Yeah, they could be really costly. I mean, that does sound a little dramatic, I think, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's far off base. I mean,
because there's a lot of multitasking going on right now. Right now we've stopped off safely on the side of the road. We're checking radars constantly. We're checking what the National Weather Service is saying. We're checking
the ham radio networks.
Yep. We're checking the spotter networks. We're checking, hey, do I even have cell service right now where I'm at? Can I call 911 if I need to? Can I call whoever needs to know there's a tornado? And also, again, you can see here, we're doing our jobs. We are hanging out, watching the storm, making sure no scary danger noodles come out of the sky and pose any threats.
And we're not always fearful. I'd say we have healthy respect for all storm systems.
I think that's a better way to put it, is a very healthy respect, which is basically you need to be very hyper aware when you're doing this, because if you're not, you could hurt yourself or someone else, because you've got traffic flying up and down the roads. You know what I mean? If you think, oh, I'm going to stop here and jump out and take this, and then you get ran over by a semi because you're too focused on the storm. Sometimes, yourself or someone else takes priority over that,
You can see me walking out of frame there. We determined the threat level was pretty low on this system, and our visuals were going down, so I snapped a couple quick photos that turned out pretty bad, actually.
Yeah, these storms, were very high precipitation, and so when that happens, this is actually a more dangerous type of storm, especially when it comes to, again, we're going to go kind of hit back at this, our previous podcast about weather myths and misconceptions about people wanting to confirm and see the tornado before they take shelter. In this situation, you would have never seen the tornado because it was so heavily rain-wrapped.
I mean, we saw it going in, and then because of the side of the storm we were on, our line of sight was impaired by rain. And there are other things we worry about. I mean, it's not just a tornado or other people even. It's hail, it's rear flank downdraft, high winds, debris. I mean, there are a lot of danger factors while we're out there.
Yep, and not to mention, too, you can see this area we're in now. It's kind of a more open area. It doesn't seem it, but lightning is a big danger at this point, especially big, powerful, positive lightning. You do not really want to be getting hit by that, obviously, because kind of far from anything that could medically help you out. So that's something those are the things you always need to keep in the back of your head. Again, I'm not advocating someone just jump in your car, and you need to get trained and all that stuff if you want to do this. This is just more, again, us discussing our kind of what we did wrong. You just saw their big lightning flash, and you never know. You could be standing outside the vehicle. 9 times out of 10, we don't ever exit the vehicle just because of that. in a lightning storm, you're the safest in your car.
Yeah, Faraday cage effect to a degree.
That way, you know what I mean, you don't want to be out there with cameras and selfie sticks and all kinds of craziness. Because obviously that could be very dangerous. But again, you know, this is kind of storm chasing 101 too. We're just waiting, watching, kind of discussing our next moves, next plans, making sure the equipment's still running, rocking and rolling.
And as you can see, you know, like you were saying, Trevor, on our last podcast, we talked a lot about misnomers, and we're actually heading towards an underpass here. We never sit here. Never sit here. It's to our left a little bit there.
But as you can see here, pan into the view, that's the supercell structure right there. Obviously, we're heading toward it because, well, we're trained to. Again, whenever there's an active tornado warning, don't try this at home, kids. But again, great storm structure there. You can see a very defined base. You can almost see pancaking over there on the right side of the frame, which are basically inflow striations from the storm sucking up all that nice moist air.
And it had warmed up a lot this day too. I mean, it had jumped probably close to 12 to 13 degrees from the time we left to this time. Moving forward, this is we repositioned from the last scene you saw. We are now about 15 miles north of Goodman, sitting on some train tracks. The storm's kind of to our front, but a little more right, and we're experiencing a little bit of hail at this point as well.
Yeah, and this is a good example of, you know, again, I see people, well, the skies are blue. If you can see here now, the camera's a little washed out because it was so bright and the contrast was crazy. Those are blue skies right there in front of us. Literally, like, I mean, it looked like it wasn't storm. There's literally a tornado on the ground behind us, 2 miles behind us, and right in front of us, here it is. There's just blue, sunny, beautiful clouds. And so that's why you always need to take tornado warnings seriously, because right now we're getting out of here. This is our escape route that we're currently taking. We decided, hey, it's time to go. This thing's getting a little close. Let's get out of here, and that's exactly what we're doing. But here, great example, blue skies. It is raining, but
yeah, it just looks like a normal thunderstorm to our front, but right behind us is a supercell developing and growing in strength. We also, at this point, we're repositioning again. We're attempting to get around to the southeast side of the system. So we're heading back to I-44 at this point.
We're trying to wrap back around the storm. And this is...
You can see there the skies are getting a little bluer, a little less contrast.
This is part, again, do not try this at home, folks, because this is where it gets dangerous, because we had to make some decisions that would not be considered safe. There's a term known as core punching, and we were heavily debating whether or not we need to do that. And basically, a core punch is when you drive through the core of the storm. This is where the strongest winds are. This is where the largest hail is. This is where the heaviest rain is.
We try to avoid it every time. We try to avoid it.
It's extraordinarily dangerous. Again, jumping ahead here, we do have some footage of us, you know, trying to core punch, trying to get through the other side. But at the same time, for us, it was the safest bet because there was an active tornado on the ground, and we wanted to avoid that. You know, I'd rather take hail damage than tornado damage. This is a great example, though, of why you do not want to be trying to escape a tornado. There's a lot of traffic. This is I-44. I mean, we're congested at this point. I think at one point we were doing like 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, this is rush hour, so we're about an hour ahead here. It's about 4:30. People are starting to head home. There's a lot of semis out on the road. So, you know, this is why we talked about last time, outrunning a tornado. You just can't really do it. If this storm's traveling 50 miles an hour and we're going 40, it's going to catch up to us. But at this point, we've repositioned. You know, we've increased our speed from 40. Luckily, we were able to get through some traffic, and we're on this same cell you've seen earlier. We're just repositioned on the better side of it right now.
Yeah, and you cannot see it on camera right now. I'm actually going to clip in. You should be seeing it right about now. This was the moment that there was an active tornado, a classic stovepipe on the ground, and what was bad about this was it was coming straight at us. We were in the direct path, so we had to figure out a way to safely get out of this area we were in. It's one of those moments you don't want to be in, obviously, as we're trying to figure our way out. You can see here off the left-hand side of the camera, it's getting darker and scarier. The wind's picking up. That's because this circulation's headed straight for us.
Yeah, we were at the opposite end of this road at the time, so we had punched through it a little bit just to make sure it wasn't going to drop down on top of us. The storm had repositioned, started moving a lot more easterly.
And also, if you want to reference one of the when we were going live on Facebook, you can actually reference one of these moments just before this too. You can actually, what happened was, so a second supercell was gaining a lot of strength. It went tornado warn, had a very defined hook echo, and we decided, hey, we're about 15 miles from this thing. Let's peel off this storm. It looks like it's weakening up. But in that Facebook Live video, I actually panned the camera back, and I distinctly remember saying, hey, this thing looks like it's tightening back up. Sure enough, about 2 minutes later, National Weather Service issues a tornado warning on it.
That almost looks like it might be tightening back up.
So this is the point where we decide, hey, okay, let's 86, let's get back up on this storm. That was our first mistake, I think, in the sense of we decided, hey, let's get back on the storm. We didn't think, though, how close we actually were to this thing. I mean, we were literally within a mile of it. And at that point, you know what I mean, if you're lagging behind, depending on how fast that storm's going, it could catch up to you real fast.
Yeah, they can increase, decrease in speed. They can shift direction, shift motion, drop funnels out of the sky, just about anywhere when you're right under it. And like we talked about, we're looking at the radar constantly, but sometimes the radar can be a minute, 2 minutes behind, and that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it is when you're there. I mean, it sure is.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, cause again, it's heavily rain wrapped. You can see here, the camera does make it clear, but I mean, it is just pounding rain, very hard to see. The tornado is actually somewhere right here in front of us right now, and you just, there's no way possible to actually see this thing because there's so much precipitation coming out of the sky.
You can see some of the inflow to our 12 right now, 12 o'clock position. We are repositioning towards that second cell. The cell we were on and kind of had been on all day up to this point was starting to occlude.
Yep.
Or go away.
It did drop a brief stovepipe tornado, but again, average tornado life, I mean, this was on the ground for maybe 30 seconds, if that.
Yeah.
We went ahead and decided, okay, this other storm, it's strong, it's new. And also, too, the storm we were on here, it was just slamming into other supercells, losing a lot of strength, and we said, hey, this one's going to die out. Let's go ahead and reposition. And again, though, we found out the hard way. We don't want to core punch. Again, just to re-specify what that is, that's punching through the core of the storm where the worst of the worst of stuff is at.
Highest winds, strongest sail.
And we ended up basically clipping right into that. That's because where we were at the time just wasn't the best, and the storm caught up to us simply. The road system wasn't as good as we thought it was. There wasn't as many straight shots for some reason. Everybody, I guess, decided to build roads as many S-curves as they could, and it got us into almost a pickle there.
Yeah, you'll see it a little bit later on.
Yeah, whenever that footage comes in, you'll see it. There was a moment I showed some a little bit of concern because I was watching the radar on our route we were taking. It was one of those, again, with the risk of storm chasing and doing what we're doing, we didn't obviously want to bust out of this and not see a tornado. So we gambled to say, let's punch through this and do this.
Yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of choice at the time, just the way the storm had shifted and the position we were in. You know, we try to make the best calls we can, and that's why we're always trying to get to a point where we can see the storm, and we're looking at, hey, what's the next town? What track is this thing making? We want to make sure we visually see the storm before we call it in so they can extend those brackets if needed. So that's always our first priority is people's safety. We cruise around too with a few medical equipment pieces in our rig here. We've got gauze, ace bandages, gloves, obviously, because we don't, we haven't ran into the situation, thankfully, where we've done any kind of damage assessment. But that very well could happen in the future, and we just want to make sure if anybody's injured and there are no first responders, their first responders are on the way, we can help them in whatever way we can. Maybe it's provide them with a splint or pack a wound, something of that nature.
Yep. And then just again, keep touching on this, just how dangerous it can actually be. You can see here just incredible precipitation rates. The winds are incredibly high. There's probably 45, 55 miles an hour winds right now. The rain is just insane, and the act of driving right now is dangerous in this moment because another driver could lose control. They could hydroplane. We could hydroplane. If it starts hailing, the windshield could blow out, which we will show here a clip of extreme hail. It was about quarter size, maybe ping pong ball size, and it was getting very, very sketchy.
Last year, we were on a quasi-linear storm front, and we were driving down a road much like this, and we had about, what was that, a 15 by 10 sign blow across the road right in front of us?
And it was a big enough sign that would have caused some issues.
I mean, we just smoked it.
It wasn't a yard sale sign. It was one of those large, for sale by owner, 400-acre kind of signs that was easily being lifted through the air.
And it wasn't...
Shit. Got large debris.
And it wasn't even a tornadic storm. It was just...
No, this was just pure straight line winds. And
the gust front came in, and I mean, it was just extremely windy.
Yep. But again, like these early storm chases, luckily nobody was hurt. This is one of those moments where we've got a lot of learning to do still as far as beating the rust off. Because it's been a full year since our last storm chase, and so a lot of good learning experiences with these.
And you can see we'll scrub it out here a little bit, and you can see the storm motion right in front of us. Just how storm acts just at about 3 times speed here. Up there in the upper left. You can see a lot of circulation going on, and we're going right past kind of the gust front, I think, here.
Yep.
And now we're in the clear, and we're heading to that.
And
second system
here we
now.
are, the second cell. This was a particularly dangerous situation that we were now in. Again, we were a little late to the ball game on this. We were traveling from an angle that you do not want to travel towards during a storm of this magnitude. This was an active tornado warning. This was 100% confirmed to be an EF1 tornado. We're core punching right now, and we're experiencing ping pong ball size hail. The camera doesn't really pick it up too well. You can kind of see ice chunks exploding off of the car and the windshield itself. This is one of those moments we decided, now you can't see it, it's heavily raining up, the tornado is right in front of us. It's about 1.5 miles in front of us there. Luckily, in hindsight, we decided, hey, this hail is getting too crazy. Let's get out of here.
You can see a little bit of it there bouncing off the hood.
And this right here is a prime example. When you try to outrun a tornado, this is what it's going to be looking like. And sometimes you may not see a car in front of you. For example, when we were traveling down I-44 at one point, there was a car that didn't have its headlights on, which is the law in Missouri during anytime your wipers are required. Headlights are on. This guy didn't have his headlights on. You couldn't see him, period. Just wasn't there. Didn't exist. So if you're trying to fly around and get away from something, you can end up slamming into a vehicle. Again, dangerous situation. We're out in the middle of nowhere, but you never know. We could come up over a hill at some point, and there's a car. You just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you see one right here.
Yep. And again, in this type of situation, when you're under, this is why it's so important to have a tornado warning. This guy doesn't know he's driving toward a tornado right now.
He has no idea. He probably doesn't have his radio on. At the very least, have on your local news station on the radio.
Yeah.
We made the right call, I think, in this situation where we turn around, and I think we had enough time. We're trying to get past, kind of out in front of this system.
Yeah, right now this is just us straight up core punching, driving through the heart of the storm, and the the hail was significant.
We're just dealing with the cards we're dealt at this point, and we're just outside of Hurley. You'll see us enter Hurley here in just a little bit. And we're trying to, again, get on that southeast side of the storm
and again,
in the inflow jet.
This is why you can see the scenery here, why they call it the jungle. There's just nothing but trees. That storm is right off to the right side of the camera here. You can kind of see the clear slot coming into view now. That tornado is pretty close to us at this point. It's probably within 2 miles of us. Again, that as far as tornadoes go, that is a fairly safe distance. However, were this thing to grow, I mean, the largest tornado recorded is 3.2 miles wide. So,
yeah, if you're in a house and you're within 2 miles, I mean, you need to be in the interior, most interior room of that structure.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Straight line winds, boom.
Rear flank downdraft coming out the side of the storm.
Yeah, you got trees. They're now introducing themselves to your house. You know, this is why it's dangerous. Yeah, we're trying to reposition here. And again, this is one of those moments where I think for us, we need to be so adamant on paying attention to where we are at all given times. There's actually some storm chasers there we just passed. But whenever, we're out there, I think whenever we last saw that EF4 tornado just outside of Golden City, when we called 911, they wanted to know where we were, and the problem was we really didn't have signal enough to actually look at GPS or anything, so we actually ended up giving them a 10-digit coordinates on exactly where we were. So this is why it's important too. There's a lot of multitasking that goes into this, because this entire time we're trying to outrun the storm, trying to get outside of the tornado, trying to figure out a good place to set up on a safe side of the storm, and all this time too, we're out in the middle of nowhere, trying to figure out, okay, what road is this? What road are we on? Are we facing north-south? Where are we going here? Now the camera obviously brightens up this a lot too, but it's getting much, much darker, and simply because of how much hail and precipitation was coming down.
Yeah, it felt like this day we went from night to day probably 4 or 5 times throughout the chase, just because it gets super dark, super light, super dark, super light. So
yep.
Here we're going around some pretty dangerous curves.
Yep, and again, heavy precip, prime example of the jungle. You can't see a thing. At this point, the tornado is once again closing its position on us. We also actually lose cell phone service at this point too. So now we have no technology to rely on, just our eyes and ears. And obviously we can't see anything. Had we known how close this tornado actually was to us, we probably would have just kept driving. We wouldn't end up turning off. You'll see here, and I'll point this out. Another thing to point out too, now there's not actually any audio because obviously it would be deafening you guys, but we're going through the heart of Hurley right now, and there's not a single tornado siren going off. This is why I always emphasize, do not rely on tornado sirens for tornado warnings, because there's not a single tornado siren going off right now. I don't know why. I don't know if they failed or if it's because they're manually operated and the person that operates them wasn't there. Regardless of the case, there were no tornado sirens. There was literally a tornado on the ground within, mile and a half of this, 2 miles of this location.
And it's important to remember this is mid-March, early spring, and there are no leaves really on the trees yet. So you can just imagine how much more impaired our line of sight would have been if there had been leaves on the trees. This is something we deal with a little bit later on in the season, mid to later on in the season.
Yep, and adding on to that though, while it would obscure views, we can actually kind of judge wind fields.
We can, yeah.
With that, you know what I mean? If we notice all of a sudden the trees start, blowing a different direction, we know we're in the danger zone, which probably they would have been at this point.
Ideally we want to be kind of in the updraft clear slot where the wind's kind of sucking into the storm. There's going to be lower precip there. In this case, the leaves would have definitely helped us a little bit, but they, it's a give and take. They're a hindrance too. We're down in a little bit more hilly country, and we're trying to find somewhere a high point to see this storm.
Yep, and the wind, obviously, when you're close to a tornado, blows toward the tornado, and so again, we don't have those visual cues quite yet with it being pretty barren on the tree front there. But at this point, we're trying to figure out again, where can we go to see this thing? We need to get up to high ground. We're up pretty low. Terrible. This is a terrible chase territory, but again, nobody likes to do it, and this is why storm spotters are so important, because again, the radar may not see the tornado, so somebody needs to visually confirm, hey, this thing's on the ground. You guys need to warn this.
Yeah, or may see it too late, or there's a lot of factors. I mean, sometimes you have mass outbreaks, and the news station is always your number one most reliable source, and emergency services are working with them all the time. But if there's 4, 5, 6 tornado outbreaks or multiple outbreaks, they're trying to work as fast as they can to identify which are the biggest threats and which are the biggest threats to the highest populated areas. So this is where spotters really come in handy, because they can help determine which threat is the biggest. Which one do we need to focus on the most? When someone just turns on that TV just for a minute, are they looking at the one headed their way, or are they looking at another? So these are things to think about. Why we're out here all the time is so we can help identify those systems and help better than the news networks in any way we can.
Yeah, there's a big difference, whenever you see a radar indicated tornado versus this is a confirmed tornado. Whenever you see that, usually either law enforcement, another spotter, or some other person has said, hey, I see the tornado, it's on the ground. Obviously, that is a very real threat at that point. Because a lot of times when it says radar indicated, the radar itself has a computer model in it and says, hey, this is a tornado, go ahead and warn this baby. And that's what's going on with that. Again, this has improved warning times by a lot, but you still need to rely on those eyes and ears of trained personnel to say, hey, this is actually on the ground. Because also you don't want to get lulled into a false sense of security, or let's say, for example, you've got 2 supercells, one in front of the other, and the first storm you warn, but it's there's nothing there. People get, oh, hey, it's a tornado warning again. There wasn't anything with the first one, so and then
complacent.
Yeah, and so they don't take shelter. But going back to the video here, we decide, hey, this is a good road. Let's pull off here. Now at the time, again, with the whole learning curve, but beating the rust off, we weren't as focused on the storm at this point. We're thinking, okay, let's just see if this is a better position. The tornado itself is in fact right next to us. You'll see it come into view here shortly. This wasn't even noticed by us until we started reviewing the footage. But there you can see very strong, crisp base.
Off to the right.
Yep, off to the right there is the tornado itself.
And we're in a fairly safe spot as far as the tornado's not coming directly at us at this point.
Right.
We've managed to kind of core punch and get on the other side of the system.
That being right there, you can actually see the tornado there on the right. That big dark blob is in fact the tornado itself.
Kind of a vertical shaft, if you will.
It's heavily rain wrapped. The tornado itself probably isn't that big, but the rain fields were just wrapped around it like crazy.
Massive. I mean, I'd say probably 2-3 miles. You can see the tree on the left. See how those branches are kind of swaying? And this is what Trevor was talking about earlier with the leaves. We are in the inflow jets.
Yeah, and if you go ahead and scrub the footage, fast forward it a little bit, you can actually see the storm motion going toward the tornado, whereas the cell itself is coming toward us. So you see that storm motion there. Now, obviously, with the frame rates of the camera and everything, it wasn't quite matching up. That's why you couldn't see without scrubbing it. With our naked eye, you could see that. Also, we couldn't really see where we were. The camera's mounted on top of the vehicle, up well off the ground there. There's actually a pretty significant ditch, another little hill. Where we were actually physically at, we ourselves couldn't really see what activity is going on. So this is why it's nice to have that camera rolling all the time.
Back it up.
It catches things that normally you can't see with your own eye.
This road dead end too. Fun fact. So we were looking on Google at the time. We always want to have an escape route.
Yep, that's definitely whenever you're staging or positioning, you always want an escape route, and that way, when a situation like this does occur, you can have a way to get out fast. again, I would never want to be in this scenario in which I had to outrun a tornado per se, but I think in previous parts of the podcast here I've talked about us using escape routes, and that's simply us being safe about it. We didn't wait until the tornado was 3 feet from us. We said, hey, this thing's a mile out, let's go ahead and keep moving. Because you just don't want to put yourself in that position.
Yeah, we're just trying to be proactive in our decisions.
Because again, going back to our last podcast talking about places to cover, not a lot of good places here to hide. Were that tornado to have turned and come straight at us here. We had a pretty predominant ditch on both sides of the roads, but I would not want to count on that to protect me.
No, that's a literal last ditch.
Yeah, and I mean there was a little tin barn next to us. I wouldn't.
There was a house behind us. There was
a house, but again, in that type of scenario, that's something you don't. I mean, we're not going to be knocking on doors. You know what I mean? Hey, can we come inside? So you always want to pay attention to that.
I would, Trevor.
Well, I mean, if it was the oh crap moment, you've got less than 2 minutes there. I probably would take the ditch at that moment. But you can actually, with the camera rolling normal here, you can actually see some good storm motion there. The little bit of a wall cloud. At this point, the tornado itself is actually parallel with this. Again, there's actually a bigger hill that we can't see. This tornado within, I would say, a mile. We were very, very close to this storm.
And the camera brightens it up quite a bit with the exposure, but real time it was very dark.
Yep.
It was close to dusk. It's probably close to 7 o'clock at this point.
Yep.
6:45, 7 o'clock. So it's starting to get a little bit darker. This was the last chase of the day before we called it. A convection wave had come in and kind of caused some of these storms to die out a little bit. We do want to mention, if you're interested in tornadoes, one of the best places you can start, I think, is in Oklahoma. They do give, there are companies that give guided tours and you commission them. That's a pretty safe bet. It's a lot different around this neck of the woods because of the terrain. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll keep prefacing this throughout, this whole experience of ours. We're going to have more storm chases. We're going to have more footage. There's going to be a lot more of nothingness, I think, than actual, tornadoes, because again, tornadoes in themselves are fairly rare. It's even rare to actually see them. That being said, storm chasing is extraordinarily dangerous. Do not attempt to do it unless you're trained to do it. You know what you're doing. People die every year doing it.
Yeah, trained spotters.
These are well-trained spotters. They've been doing it for years. It's a dangerous activity, and I highly recommend not doing it unless you are interested. Take the time, learn the stuff. It's not about driving. It's you need to know how these storms work, how they're kind of think like the storm, where the storm's going, where it could go, all that kind of thing. Not to mention the fact is again the multitasking of where you're at.
There are a lot of variables.
What's the weather going to be like 20 miles ahead of you? Are there going to be floodplains? Are you going to have to, if you're looking at Google Maps, you think, oh, here's a road access, but in fact, it's a low water bridge crossing.
It's washed out.
There's 6 inches of rain falling right now, and it's completely washed out. What are you going to do now? You just trapped yourself. That kind of thing you've got to pay attention to. But I think overall, this was a good storm system to get on. Luckily, again, nobody was hurt. There may have been some minor property damage. I know trees were destroyed.
Yeah, I think they said 2 barns were taken out.
The most important thing, though, nobody was hurt in these storms. These were on the weaker side of things as far as like straight line winds and stuff like that goes. However, we are very early
2021, very early
in storm season here. So as April approaches, as it starts getting warmer, I do see these things starting to ramp up a little bit. That being said, with it being this early, correlation isn't causation. However, there's been a lot more tornadoes this side of the year than there were like last year at this point, especially significant tornadoes. I mean, Texas has seen big tornadoes, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas. These places have seen large tornadoes, long-lived tornadoes. Stuff that you typically don't start seeing until May. It's somewhere in like Oklahoma or Kansas. So I feel like this storm season could be fairly active. So again, Make sure everybody's got a way to receive some sort of warning. Your watches, make sure you're ready for it. Storm season's here. This is going to start becoming more and more frequent, especially if you live in Tornado Alley. This time of year, it's definitely a good idea if you're living in the Midwest to have your tornado plans ready, because it's here. 1 minute, hey, the weather says it's going to be nice, and the next thing you know, never mind, cold fronts moving in or low pressure fronts moving in. Next thing you know, there's significant thunderstorms. What's funny is when we were looking at weather models before this, I kept thinking, well, that's weird. This was actually right before we were leaving, so I was just kind of trying to check some quick radar models, and it's like, oh, that's weird, showing snow. And in fact, it did snow
less than 12 hours later.
Yeah, the next morning it did in fact snow.
Less than 12 hours.
These storms were getting pushed by a big cold front, and it was significant enough to cause actual snow. So that was an interesting weather dynamic to that. 1 minute, tornadoes, the next just snowfall. But,
Snow-nado.
Yeah,
that'd be
Snow-nado. That's funny because I think I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago. I do recall seeing some storm chasers. It was in Iowa, and there was snow on the ground, but there was large tornado on the ground. They were tracking it, and that was just an interesting contrast to see, because again, anytime, anywhere, any time of the year, there could be tornadoes. But this time of year especially is the prime time for tornadoes. As we start getting into April, these tornadoes will start getting more and more dangerous, more vigorous, more longer lived. So just
be aware, I'd say.
Yeah,
be aware.
Yeah, be ready for it.
And we welcome any questions to the TS Severe Weather page, comments, concerns. Even if you're like, oh, my question, this may be stupid, feel free to ask it. We're happy to assist, and it's a learning experience for us too. Who knows? You may teach us something.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to caveat all of this with, we are not meteorologists. We are weather enthusiasts. That doesn't mean that we haven't studied and done our homework a little bit. So there may be some sort of language mistakes as far as calling something what it's actually not. There may be some jargon that we use that's not exactly term accurate, but for the most part, I think we're trained up and learned enough to know that, yeah, this is what's going on here with this. So, like I said, if you know a lot about weather or something, you see us call a funnel cloud a danger noodle or something, just forgive us on that. We may use slang that doesn't, you'll hear terms like, I don't know, like the bear's cage or something. That's not actual technical language that we may use. That's just not accurate at all. Or, and also colloquially, as we chase together, we make up, terms of something that just makes sense to us, but may not make sense to someone else.
Yeah, it's just a form of communication that's fast.
We may end up calling something that's, a wall cloud. We may call it something else. Who knows? Because you got to think in this moment, our brain's going 1,000 miles an hour, and you got to have a quick way of communicating. Sometimes just being able to say, "Hey, there's a tornado over here." It may be danger noodle. That would be the cue. You know what I mean? So it could be fast communication. So, like I said, if we made a mistake or used some sort of weird term that doesn't make sense, let us know in the comments. Ask us. We'll let you know. But until then, stay safe. We'll be ready for weather. Again, though, I would also, before I end this here, would like to talk about, normally our chase area is southwest Missouri. We generally won't travel too far out of state. Luckily, we are close to places like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas. So that being said, though, if you're not from around here, if you're in Alabama, those kinds of places, make sure you have your local weather channels ready for that, because a good learning experience with this was
Tulsa.
Tulsa, Oklahoma was actually hit with this storm system as well. But trying to scramble between taking pictures or reporting and doing Facebook Live, and it was kind of a mess at one point. And then I realized, don't rely on us or this channel to actually give you tornado warnings or anything like that, because as the moment's happening, we may be out there doing our job and it's not reliable. I'll say that right now. I may not be able to. We may even not have signal to do anything.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah, I mean our primary goal anytime we go out, we do want to collect footage and data. That is all very important. But we want to report it to the proper channels and let those channels report it to you as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's our one job when we're out there is actually spotting itself. The pictures and stuff are secondary. When you're in that moment, you think, okay, we're safe. There's not a tornado. Let's go ahead and start taking some pictures. This looks beautiful. But then, it's time to go. It's go time whenever you do see that funnel cloud, and there's lives on the line at that point. You got to let people know. But like I said, don't rely on us to be like, because we may not be on top of it. We may be doing other stuff. We may not have cell service. So make sure you have those ways to get watches and warnings, because we are not reliable enough to do that. Again, if you're out of state, if you're not in Southwest Missouri, make sure you've got that stuff going to go. However, if you're in Southwest Missouri, this is where we're located. This is our primary focus. The Springfield area, Joplin, basically the entire KSGF viewing area. So I think I will end it there. I appreciate everybody that
everybody.
Decided to stop by and listen. Again, any questions, comments, make sure you leave them. Make sure to like this. Make sure to tell everybody about it. Come follow us.
We appreciate all the support.
Yep. And so I think we'll end it there, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, if you guys like this, let us know. We'll do these after each chase probably. So.
Yep.
We'll see you later.